Okay, and you are all set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. This meeting of the Joint Shared Services Subcommittee is been called to order. It's March 22nd, and it's, according to my watch, 6:03. James, could we have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilor Camillo?
Here.
Councilor Minor?
Here.
Councilor Nagel?
Here.
Board Member Stam?
Here.
Board Member Silvia?
Present.
Right. Also present for the record, Town Manager Keith Chapman, Lou Jacomowitz, Board of Ed Chief Finance Operations Officer, Steve Farisi, Assistant Superintendent, Janet Murphy, Finance Director, Town of Newington, Mayor Del Buono, Board of Ed Chairman Paul Vasella, Heather Shanti. And I believe that is everyone. If I missed anybody, I see Superintendent Brummett has joined us as well. You are all set.
Good. And if we could move to next order of business. Under communications, continued discussion of various proposed shared services between the town and Board of Education. Before people have a chat, or maybe Mr. Chapman or Superintendent Brummett would like to start this after I make a comment, just so we're all on the same page. At the last meeting, among other things that we kind of shared in terms of what services might be shared between the Board of Ed, or rather the Board of Ed and the town side, we agreed on finance, IT, facilities, and transportation, not necessarily in that order. And we were told by the town manager and the superintendent of schools that perhaps facilities would be the easiest one to proceed with. And there was going to be talk in terms of finance and other things between the superintendent and the town manager. And we left it for them to do that. And then my understanding is that whatever the results are would be presented to not only the Board of Education at their next meeting, but also at the meeting of the town council. And that's a little overview, just in case. And hopefully I'm correct in what I've said. So I'll open it to whoever wishes to further the conversation before we get to recommendations from the town manager and the superintendent of schools. Anyone have a comment or something they wish to share?
Superintendent.
I'd like to make a few remarks if I could, Chairman Nagel.
Certainly.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, I have had the opportunity to do quite a bit of research. I actually reached out to my counterparts in West Hartford, because I know this committee has used the West Hartford example quite a bit, as well as Vernon, and then of course my own experiences in Plainville. If I could, I did ask Steve Farisi to put together just a few slides so we could share some overview comments based on our research, as well as some direct conversations that I had with communities that are doing shared services arguably pretty well. And that would be Vernon, West Hartford, and Plainville. So I don't know if Steve is allowed to share his screen.
I do have the sharing available. I believe I've got it set. So you should be able to place those up now.
Point of order. The agenda states that this is the first item was basically to discuss anything in the past. And so I don't mind Dr. Brummett's recommendation on the second item on the agenda as I saw it, or item B. But at this point, I'd like to be able to give either the town manager an opportunity to also share any information that he might have available to him as the agenda has outlined.
Yes, if I may, as was suggested earlier, there was a meeting held on Thursday with the superintendent and myself, along with our various finance directors and so forth. And the conclusion at that time was that based upon new information that I had received from Maureen, that the positions that run these particular departments on the Board of Ed side, several of them have unionized. And that creates somewhat of a dilemma because the fact that they're in the union, the unions can claim that work that would traditionally be done by a non-union employee. We do not have unionized employees in the administrative functions on the town side, which begs the question how that all came about. And I believe that the formation of the union may not be in conformance with the town charter. But in any event, these people have formed a union. The facilities director that's retiring, from what I'm told, is not in the union because he is not certified. The IT director is in the union. The finance director is not in the union. And I believe the transportation person is, I'm not sure whether they're in the union. So the union issue is one element that I think has to be discussed further and overcome. And the second issue is that upon the completion of our meeting on Thursday, we had submitted what you see in front of you as a shared joint services shared update. However, there were changes made following the meeting that changed the real meat of this memo. I think, Heather, you have the original memo that was developed, do you not?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, can you show that?
Sure. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
And the difference is really, it's a little too small for me to read, but I believe in the okay, that's better. Okay, we concluded that there were two feasible opportunities, one being facilities, the other being finance. And the original plan was that over the next 3 months, we'd create and finalize a shared services job description for the director of facilities. And we were intended to fill that position by July 1st. We continued to analyze opportunities in the finance department and should have both departments merged by September 1st. Now, that was the original intent. However, the newer version of the memo takes out the merger aspect of the finance department. And if you can put that up now, James, we'll look at that language. So this one says that the finance, okay, we continue to analyze shared services opportunities in the finance department and will implement all recommended changes by September 1st. So the difference is that this memo is saying that we're going to continue to analyze the shared services and we'll implement any and all recommended changes, where the other memo said that we would definitely merge the departments by September 1st. And I think that the merger still can happen. That individual that represents the finances of the schools are not in the union, so that's not an issue. And I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to merge the two together. I indicated at the meeting that Janet would be in charge of the finance department when the merger is complete. So I think that's where we kind of left off with our meetings. So I don't know where you want to go from here. And the union issue, I've asked Ben and Kona to look further into this because I don't believe that it's in conformance with the charter. And I know this was an issue years ago that was challenged and determined that the school administrative employees could not unionize unless the town administrative employees also wanted to. And this time around, apparently there was no inquiry into this town administrators being part of any union. So I think it's.
Mr. Administrator, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I call for the orders of the day. Basically, I call for the orders of the day or a demand to regular order and following of the agenda as provided.
Any further input, or does that go right to a vote? James? Can we let Superintendent Brummett speak? Yes.
I'd like to.
Sure.
I would say the reason the memo was revised, or my suggestion was because during the meeting last week, I recalled distinctly stating that I did not agree that Janet would oversee both departments, and we talked about that. And I don't recall any agreement being reached about a timeline of September 1st. So while I agreed to, and I thought that's what the conversation was, that we would start with the facilities and that certainly finance could be next in line, but I did not agree to a merger statement at all, nor did I agree to having Janet oversee both departments. And that is why when this memo came on my desk, I did ask for those modifications.
Keith, do you have any further comment at this time?
No, I think that we're not in agreement on how to move forward. And we have some issues dealing with the unionization. So it's really being left up to this committee now to decide how we move forward.
Yeah, well, I do think we should move forward with facilities, since that seems to be just a comment on my part. Let's see. Yes, Maureen.
Thank you. I would also say that I'm certainly still in agreement with moving forward, obviously with facilities as the starting off point. I do think we really should clear up whether or not those other unions that have been referenced today are illegal or what have you, because this discussion took place over a year ago. And Rich Mills spoke with Mr. Chapman, and I believe Rich Mills, he's, by the way, an attorney from Shipman and Goodwin. And he also spoke with Mr. Ancona, Attorney Ancona, and I believed at the time the issue was resolved because those unions went forward with no further concern. So I don't understand why that's still being called as a possible illegal situation or against the town ordinance or charter rather, because I believe it was worked out a year ago. But I think if there's any question marks, that should be addressed immediately.
Anyone else have a comment, something to add? I kind of realized that the two things on our agenda would kind of meld together or go back and forth. So please, anyone else who has a comment? And
I've got one, Dave.
Sure, Mike.
Okay. Well, we're here for shared services. Merge, join, shared. They're all the same. You just don't like the word merged. I think we should put them both together and work on them both at the same time. And whichever one is ready for the town administration to share service, because you're not going to get rid of the people on the facility side, and you're not going to get rid of finance. Lou's not going anywhere because he has to show Maureen where he's at and what he has, and he'd be working with her for a couple of years until he decides if he's moving on. So I really think, and it's going to take a long time. This isn't like flip a switch and okay, we're here. I think we need to start working on this next week. And you guys meet again on Thursday and we meet again on Monday until we get this done. We're not going to just kick the can down the road, like I said the last meeting, because that's what's been happening for years. We can get this done. I know Steve is quite a guy. My wife told me I should definitely introduce myself to you, Steve. She went to school with you. And
At Texas A&M?
not you. No, Steve Parisi.
Oh,
And we can get this done. That's why we're here. We're not going anywhere. And you know, I may be naive here, as I've been told, but I know we stand here together and work as a team. The main thing is you've got to get the proper software. Yours doesn't talk to the town side. So the town already has unions and payroll and all that, and it breaks it down. So you're going to have somebody do data entry for a long time. You've got all kinds of years there Lou has on his desk that has to come into the town side. So I know it works in other towns. It takes about 2 years before you start seeing any real savings and figuring out who's who. But sitting and talking about it and let's get another committee. Let's get this. We have a committee here and we all are looking for the same thing. Saving the town money in the end and making it easier for people who work for the town to see what's what. And I hope we can move this forward tonight so you guys can meet again on Thursday, and then we'll meet next Monday, and we'll keep doing this until there's a real plan here and it's working.
Mayor Del Buono, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologize. I was not able to attend last Monday. So if you've already discussed this, then I apologize for the repetitive question. But a couple of things. I'm wondering, I guess, what are the reservations that we have? Because until we put everything on the table and determine what the reservations are and how to solve them, I think that's the only way we're going to move forward. So other than, we're talking about timeline, we're talking about who's going to do what are the actual concerns or reservations so that we can address them? And then my second question would be, has this committee determined what next steps are? So once this committee makes its recommendation, the superintendent and the town manager typically do the hiring for each side, but when we're merging something like this, what are the next steps? Does the council and the Board of Ed have to vote on the merger? Is it just, how does this get decided ultimately so that we know where we're going with this? Those are my two thoughts.
Okay, Cindy Stam, do you have your hand up?
I'm sorry, I did. Beth asked a couple of questions. I wasn't here last week because I wasn't feeling well. So I am concerned about how quickly we're moving. And I know that we were on this committee last year and Steve was there too. I'm concerned that as this got started, we discussed that we were going to really collaborate and make sure each side was going to be comfortable with what we're doing. I'm really concerned about the finances, and that's because I come from an education background, and did I was at that central office, and it's a different ball of wax, and I understand the town wants control over what's spending and what's not spending. I don't have any issues with how the Board of Ed manages things because I think they do a great job, and I think they've been very open and very clear about everything this year, and even ever since Maureen got on board. And I want it to be collaborative. And if there people have reservations, it concerns me because I'm not there living it. And the people who are sharing concerns are living it. And we need to listen to that. And I don't deny, we all want it. I know Maureen knows that works okay. She knows that it will eventually be a good thing. I agree that it's going to be a good thing, but I'm not sure about the finance piece. I'm just clear with that. Facilities, I think that is I definitely think that's a great opportunity and that we can make that work. But my reservation is hearing that there is some concern and uncomfortableness with the way we're doing it and what's going on, especially with the wording and whatever. Merge or shared is a different thing. People take it in different lights, and I understand that. And I do agree that we need to start putting things together. We also need to make sure that all those steps and the people and the players that are playing that are comfortable with what's going to happen. And I know that the Board of Ed works closely with Janet regularly. So it's not like they don't have a history of working well together. I'm not sure I'm not sure what that looks like. Like, we're making a decision and I'm not sure what that looks like. It's just, we're going to do this. And I think when we were talking about this, we all really looked at things, and we had West Hartford Committee. We all kind of understood what it looked like and how it went about. And and I don't know, I'm just kind of going off here, but I'm just concerned that there's uncomfortableness, and I'm concerned that we need to make sure all the ducks are in a row and everyone is clear exactly what's happening. And I'm not sure that there's a need to have Gina oversee the Board of Ed in the way that you're implying here.
Maureen, I see your hand's been up for quite a while, so please.
You're muted.
I know, my apologies. When the conversation started last week, it was really, I thought, going to be about facilities, and then quite unexpectedly, it turned into finances as well. I don't have any reservations other than the speed, because I've talked to West Hartford, I've talked to Vernon, I've got the experiences from Plainville. No one did it in a matter of weeks. I did hear the comments last time that the committee's been meeting for 4 years and they haven't gotten much done, but I've been in the district for 2 years and I've only attended 3 shared services committee meetings. Today would be the 4th. So it really may have been in existence for 4 years, but probably not, at least not in my experience, not meeting regularly. And we had always set our sights on, as soon as we had a vacancy, that would be our first entree into this plan. So obviously I'm all in for a facilities discussion, and I've got a lot of information to share from Vernon and West Hartford. Neither of those districts have merged or shared their finance departments. And I will add that merger is defined as 2 single entities coming together so that they're indistinguishable from each other. So if the assertion by everybody is that the board would still have their finance department as with the town, then merger is not really the right term for this. I do think shared services and merger don't equal the same thing, which is why I had a hard time with that word. But to say that I'm not in support of moving forward on certainly facilities, and ultimately, I think we should talk about ways to make our finance departments more efficient. But I don't know, I guess that's hopefully answering some of the questions that have been surfaced tonight. But I can tell you from districts or towns and boards that have done it well, they will tell you it took time, and it took time with all the right people at the table who had an impact on the decision-making. Just because a committee's met for 4 years doesn't mean these issues have been gone into any detail in 4 years. I think from even the 3 meetings that I attended before tonight, or 2 out of the 3, it was very high level theory, not nitty gritty details of how it would get done. Thank you.
I got one.
Mike, go ahead. I'm having some problem here with the hands going up, so forgive me if I'm not doing things in order, but I did see your hand go up, Mike.
Well, I get the part where Janet would run finance. Well, she would oversee, you'd still have Lou running Board of Ed because he's not going anywhere. And at least he would get the 30 years of information he has, and the 2 of them may learn something from each other. And when he's ready to go, we'll be prepared, because it's going to take a couple years to get this done, no matter how you look at it. And if he decides to go before then, we're not going to be in the best spot. So that's why I'm thinking maybe we should look at this first. The facilities is going to happen in July because we have a person to go in there. So
Who?
You know,
haven't put a job description up yet.
Well, I believe the town has put one out. I'm not positive.
Chris Reiner, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I agree with the standpoint of moving forward and putting together a job description for facilities. And then beyond that, you're going to need to develop some type of an org chart in terms of who we have on each side and see how it lays out, because you have existing facilities techs on both sides of the organizations that would theoretically, merge under one. I understand. I believe they're both in the same union, so that should be a non-issue. But I think there's got to be a little bit of clarity, not just those positions, but as a whole, org charts laid out on either side, and then to figure out how you're going to, migrate them together and develop essentially a new organizational chart. And I think jumping at anything other than the facilities is something that we should do as a first step and continue the conversation on these other different positions, because it's beyond finance, it's beyond facilities, it's beyond information technology, it's beyond transportation. We have so many different moving parts on both organizations that it is definitely going to take time to do this right and lay this out right. Now, there appears to be questions as to whether or not the organization on the Board of Ed side, as well as the town side, it was my understanding that there were also considerations made of unionizing on the town side. Where those left, I don't know where the conversations ended, but just to take an overlap and find out who's unionized, who's not, where they lay out in an overall organizational chart, I think is going to be the first step to try to even figure out how to implement any of this beyond what we're talking about now. And, in terms of the continued conversation of this, the committee has met for 4 years, correct. Take the last 12 months out of the mix because we have not met. There's a year right there. There was a transitional period from when Maureen was hired to the next council. It takes time. Is it something I wish we could have accelerated? Absolutely. And are we accelerating it now? Yes. But I don't want to go too fast, just trying to make up what we felt were lapses in taking too long to get where we are now.
Okay, Mike, do you have a comment?
Yeah. Finance supports all the other departments. It funds them and it knows where the money's going. And that's where you would start, because that way you would know how to handle each department. You can't just go to the department and then go, hey, Lou, what's going on with this one or what's going on with that one? No, up front, how he does things, how he spends the money, and then you can decide what you're going to do with facilities and IT and transportation. Finance should be first.
Cindy, you have your hand up again? You're muted.
The thing I'm concerned about right now is, and someone needs to clarify that for me, that I feel like the conversation is being implied that as soon as Lou decides that it's his time to retire, you're going to eliminate the Board of Ed business manager position. And that's really concerning for me. I really believe that we should start with facilities. And I wanted to say, I agree with what Chris said. I think we're moving way too fast. I think it's going to be done. It's going to be a messy job. And we haven't looked at all the details like we need to, like the unions and all that, like just what Chris just said.
Chris, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, again, it's just to reiterate that this is going to be a long process that needs to be laid out properly in advance to actually execute. And what I would recommend, and we've never done this, would be to do an actual overlay of the bodies involved of these quote unquote merged position or joined positions to see what the organizational charts look like on each side and how they would overlap and how they would work together. Because without that, this is really a moot point to just say we're going to merge and that's it. Because it's more dynamic than that, and we need to understand what we have all in to realize how to get to the next step. So I would propose overlay an actual overlay of what positions we're talking about potentially joining on both sides and see how it lays out. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Mayor Dabuno, you have a comment to make?
You're muted.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I did serve on the committee, I don't know, a couple of years ago now, I guess. And I know we had an overlay similar to that as an example from West Hartford that showed essentially, so just what Cindy was saying, it did show that on either side of the aisle, you have one person in charge of Board of Ed, one person in charge of town side, and then there's kind of one overseeing person over the entire department. So I don't disagree with what Chris is saying, that we need to have a layout of what those positions look like right now, just so we know what we have. But ultimately, my thought process based on the research we had done in the past was that there would be one person overseeing the department as a whole, with someone in the lead on each side of the aisle, so to speak, and to make sure that the blending took place in order, and we would never look to eliminate that. There would still have to be someone. There are going to be differences on either side. So the Board of Ed versus town, there will always be inherent differences, but I think the hope is that we would merge and become one, in that we would be using similar software, similar methods, similar ways of reporting, so that information could be had by both sides equally and as easily, I guess, in terms of pulling reports and that kind of thing. So I still see it as, in my mind, it's like a TP structure. There's one at the top, one on either side, and then the people on either side that fall into place underneath. So there still would be a supervisory piece in my mind, based on what West Hartford had shared with us, that would be on either side, with one person kind of just overseeing the two department heads, so to speak. And if I'm wrong on that, correct me. Like I said, I haven't been involved probably in over a year now, but that's what we had discussed previously.
Mike? You have your hand up? Steve, I do see you there, but Mike's hand up, yours doesn't appear on here, but after Mike's done.
Go ahead. I'll wait.
Okay, Steve? Steve Sylvia?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to reiterate what Mayor Del Buono has stated. The West Hartford gave a overview, gave us a chart and a path. Chris, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think that the methodology that West Hartford applied, we can take leverage and take advantage of. In my personal opinion, I don't think we're moving fast enough. And I've been on this committee for a long time. Yes, everything that's been stated, there's not been that many meetings. When Ms. Anest was the chair, she was remiss in follow-ups and active pursuit. I don't know really what the cause was, but it is what it is. And yes, we've had the same sort of lapse as the transition to the current leadership that's in place. Again, I don't know why, but I can say that we need to set the goal. And the goal we've discussed, and I think we're all shaking our heads, that the goal is that we want to have consolidated services to save this town money. Now, to the point that Dr. Brummett brought up, that she did not agree to the language that was insinuated within the first memo. To me, that's just a point of negotiation on where the organizational structure lies, but it's a matter of mapping it out. If it takes a little bit more time, as Chris or Cindy has alluded to get that mapping in place and get everybody comfortable, fine. But we still need to have the ultimate goal, with the understanding that we want to consolidate the services and have the Board of Ed focus on education. We do not need to be a duplicative government entity. We just need one government, one set of services. And since we're under a town manager form of government and not a strong mayor, sorry, Mayor Beth, but in my mind, it's normal and would flow that everything under the TP would flow up to Mr. Chapman or whomever would be the manager at that point in time, or any point in time. The Board of Ed would then be in a position to focus completely on education and curriculum and what is good for the students, and not have to worry about the ancillary services that we have to provide. So that's my position. I would prefer that we go as fast as we humanly can. If that meant we had to meet every single night for the next 365 days, I'm all for it. Now, I'm being sarcastic. I know that's not how government works, but I've been waiting for 4 years. So for to come up with an excuse that I need to now map it out and overlay. I've got an overlay. I have a map. We can replicate what West Hartford has done. They've taken the path before us. They set the trail. Vernon has also done the same. And so to that end, I'm with Michael. I can't wait to get this over with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James, for giving me a different format a little while ago for saying whose hands went up and whatever. Superintendent Brumett?
Again, what I had started to chat about earlier, and then it kind of turned course a little bit, is I did speak to West Hartford directly. First of all, they don't have their finance departments as a shared service, nor does Vernon. But that aside, what I heard from that superintendent, and he was there, Tom Moore, was there 14 years ago when shared services began in West Hartford. And he said to me, Maureen, you've got to meet, you've got to talk about all of the job responsibilities, you've got to talk about how things would work, and you really have to take some time. It's not an overnight decision. And, I'm only going by what people have said to me, as well as my own experience in Plainville, which took about 2 years, and not 2 years of meeting a couple times a year, but 2 years of meeting regularly to talk about how this would all play out. I have no problem talking about shared software, no problem talking about how Janet and Lou could exchange more information on a regular basis. My only concern is that we've got to go at a very careful pace with regard to process and how these jobs are all going to get done. We have mapped out all of the responsibilities of the maintenance and facilities department. We could map out all the responsibilities of the finance department, but to say this is going to get done in a matter of weeks is just absolutely not in keeping with what we're hearing from people that have gone before us, who have done it in a way that has now stood the test of time. Arguably, West Hartford's been at it for 14 years and Vernon's been at it, I forget how long they've been at it, but probably 5+ years. And I would say Plainville's approaching 5+ years as well.
Mr. Chapman?
Yeah, I don't know what is taking any other town so long to do this, but let me just give you some facts from the general government side. If we're talking about finance, we have a finance director, a deputy finance director, and 2 staff members. There's 4 people in that department. In our facilities, Paul Boutot is our facilities manager at this point. He's also the IT director and other assorted assignments. He has 4 people under him that are all unionized rank and file. We don't have a large organization that's going to require massive amounts of study. I just don't get what the challenge that would take 2 years to get something accomplished that could be done in a couple of months. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If that's how we operate in this town, no wonder we're in trouble in many respects. We can't do that. We can't sit back and wait 2 years to get something done. We're struggling now. What is 2 years worth of study going to do when you have a small staff? It's not General Motors, it's not Aetna, it's 4 people in finance and basically with the custodian, 5 people in facilities. That's it on the town side. And all of them, except for the 3 people, are unionized rank and file type employees. I don't see what the study would be. I don't know.
Mike? You have your hand up?
Yeah. The process should start now. It takes 2 years before you see any change. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you don't start it now, in a year, 2 years, we're going to be like these other towns, which are totally different. I believe West Hartford's a corporation. They have a strong mayor, paid mayor. And things are done totally different. They have paid fire department. Their police department has a couple hundred police. They do their own paramedics now. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are done there. So we really can't even gauge ourselves by them. We're by ourselves, and we don't have to look at other places. We can set the bar for them. Okay, I'm tired of saying, oh, look what Weathersfield's doing or this one's doing. What is Newington going to do? You know, we can be better than the rest of them, and they can follow us. But sitting here and arguing and saying, oh, this doesn't work or that doesn't work, it's not going to. Somebody doesn't want to give up control, and that's really it. But if you work together as a team, one day you'll be able to do that, and we're not doing it. If I was Lou, I wouldn't want anybody telling me what to do after running the show for 30 years. I've got a business that's been here almost 60. It's a tough thing to give that up, but to know someone can try to fill your shoes and get the ball rolling to help the town and save money, that's what we're here to do. Save the residents of Newington. Because a lot of people are going to move away. They're going to get out of Connecticut. And if we show the other towns it can be done to keep their residents here instead of moving down south, lower mill rates, we'll get this done. But it should start now. The town administration, the Board of Ed, when we leave here tonight, have another date when you're going to sit down, and have one the next week. Have a schedule for the next month. And then we'll meet you on Mondays and you can tell us where you're at. But the political side of it, Chris, myself, the mayor, we don't belong in this room until you've come up with a plan. So please work together and get this done. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Chris?
Well, our job is to establish the policy. That's why we're here. It is the job of the superintendent and the town manager to execute those policies. So it does fall on our laps, Mike. We have to make the decisions here at the table. I agree with you. We need to keep this process moving. We don't need to stall it out. I think we're all in agreement that we want to work together to execute this, but it's not something I want to haphazardly address and just chase just for the sake of saying we did it. I want to make sure that we're doing this right the first time, so there's no comebacks, that when we execute this, this is the way that it stays for the rest of our days in Newington. I agree 100% to continue on executing facilities, but you look at the facilities, Mr. Chapman just left out a few pieces. We have contract services that go out for janitorial services to private agencies. Should that stay that way? Should it go in-house? These are all decisions that need to be made once we execute an overlaid map of this is what we have to start with, and this is where we go up. We have the opportunity now to definitely do it. And I want to continue to work. I don't care if we have to meet once a week. Let's meet once a week. Let's keep this ball moving. Let's look to execute it for the July 1st fiscal year of this position and all these, within all of these departments. But now you need to overlap who you have for general maintenance, who you have for electrical, who you have for plumbing. Lay it all out and find out where we're gapping and where we're overlapping and make that the first step. I don't want to disagree that we need to move this process and it needs to go beyond this department in a relatively short period of time, but we need to start somewhere. And I think this is common ground by the fact that we have attrition occurring shortly, that we take advantage of that. The job description is being drafted for that position. Let's, look at it, overlay it, and go.
Mayor Del Buono?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think from everybody I'm listening to, I think there's a couple of things that I just want to mention. Mr. Silvia, you mentioned that you felt like things had stalled in the past with previous chairs and even with the transition to this committee. But I will tell you, you said you don't know why. I know why. The reason that things stall is because we hit walls every time we start to discuss something. It's nothing but bogged down in just baloney. It really gets bogged down to the point where why continue to meet? So please don't let that happen with this committee. We're at a point where I've talked to the stakeholders on both sides. We have enough people that really want this. This committee has to make this work. We have an opportunity here. The July 1st deadline of hiring someone is the perfect opportunity to start with facilities. And yeah, I understand what you're saying, Chris, that there are other little pieces that we need to figure out, but at some point, in order to figure those things out, we have to also take a leap of faith and make it happen. Once we get this merged and we have the top tiers in place and the people coming down the sides, those things are going to have to be figured out. When we met with Leon Davidoff from West Hartford, he said, it's not going to happen like this and it's not going to be smooth, but you have to do it and then you have to work out all the bumps. He was very clear that it wasn't an easy transition, and I don't anticipate that it will be easy. I anticipate that if we work together, it will be easier than if not. And so I'm begging this committee to move forward, get this done fast. I think the two priorities have to be facilities and finance. The other two are going to be more difficult, perhaps because of the union issues, but those are things we need to start hammering out now, not wait until we get the first two done, but really be working concurrently on all four to see if we can get this done and get it done in a reasonable time manner. I'm not suggesting that it happen in weeks. I understand that it takes time, but for us to keep saying, all we're doing is talking about why we can't do it instead of why we can. The narrative I'm hoping of this committee will change to, we can do this. This is how we're going to do it. And this is what we need to put in place. Because otherwise what's going to happen is that wall's going to go up. This committee's going to stop meeting. And we're going to be stuck in the mud like we always are. Thank you.
Superintendent Brummett?
I would suggest that we move forward from this conversation. I think we've certainly heard from others. I did bring tonight some suggestions about how to move forward on any discussion, some of the key elements of what you need to talk about in order to have a shared services discussion. Then my understanding is that we're working on a meeting with, if I'm not, maybe it's already scheduled, my secretary was working on it, about the facilities position, which only became open about 10 days ago, to discuss next steps. And it was all the stakeholders, Dick Vita and others would be there to discuss, all the important pieces and go from there. So, that's already in the works. If concurrently we want to start talking about finances, and Lou and Janet can meet to talk about how there could be efficiencies in that department, I'm all over that as well. I just think we have to not have a foregone conclusion about how it's going to go, but just kind of work toward how could it go and see where the road takes us. But if you were to talk to West Hartford like I did very recently, you'd hear them say, you've got to work collaboratively, you've got to sit around the table and really see the big picture. And it does take time. I'm not putting a timeline on it, but it does take time. So I'm ready to roll up my sleeves as time permits. I think facilities, I think we've got a meeting scheduled within the next week, and let's just go forward from there. And if finance wants to talk to, they can. I just don't know how much can be done parallel, but we can try. But let's move forward.
Steve, your hand's up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the Shared Services Committee recommend to the respective parties the consolidation of both facilities and finance over the next period of time with the goal of September 1st. And there's no and. Thank you. That was it.
Second that.
Mike seconds it. Is there any discussion?
Just a small point of order. You're still under
Certainly.
communications. Your next item under your agenda is recommended action. So unless you're done with all of your communications on both of these, then we should move on to that. Otherwise, you're still communicating,
Okay.
not acting.
Steve, can you hold off? I see a few more hands up before I got to you.
That's
that all
quite
right,
all
Steve?
right.
Okay, thank you.
I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm also happy to place my motion on the table in the future.
Yeah, place it on the table when we get to the next topic, okay?
Yes.
All right, let's see. Mike?
Okay. This is for everybody. Let's say this is inevitable and it's going to happen. Sit back and come up with exactly what you can offer the town to make this happen. what you're very good at and how we can join services, because it says joint shared services, and make this work. Go home tonight, make notes. What can you do to work with Janet, and what can facilities from both sides of the town do to work together, and then go from there. But don't just push back and say, no, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. It won't work. Think about this and write it down, come up with some notes, and bring them back when you guys meet. Hopefully you can meet again this Thursday. It'd be great. And then we'll see you on Monday. Thank you.
Chris? Your hands up? Chris?
No, we'll
No?
agree with Mike that I think we need to let them try to work through a few more things. And if you want to move forward with what I think everybody agrees with tonight, so it's able to sit on the council agenda, which is facilities, and to continue the conversation on finance for next week. If you want to do them as two separate motions, Steve, I think you'd have a commitment to move at least something so we are showing progress forward versus not, and just getting bogged down, as Mayor Beth described before, and just getting stalled. I would at least like to move forward what we have, as I think everybody in agreement on. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Chapman?
Yeah, I guess being the new kid on the block here, I guess I'm somewhat confused as to what it is that this committee wants to accomplish. If you want to merge the finance departments together, and if you want Janet Murphy to be the head of the finance department, then I would say that's what you should vote on and expect administration to get it done. The same with facilities, the same with IT. You know, doing the actual putting it all together is the responsibility of administration. You set policy. That was said early in this meeting today. But it sounds like you, as the committee, may be falling into carrying out that policy, which is the responsibility of the administration. And I don't see any reason why you cannot vote to merge all the four departments that are in question and expect it to be done. You're our bosses. But, you know, I just think that we're wallowing around out here, and time is in my book of essence, and it's just not happening. And I was prepared when I came on board. I was told shared services is a priority. I guess it's not a priority if you guys are going to try to administer the policies that you are setting. I don't know.
Cindy Stam?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I do think we're moving too fast. I think September 1st is not advisable, but I'm not I'm not disagreeing that we need to do this, but I do think that fast timeline could be detrimental to how the process works out, like Chris said.
I believe that we do need to move forward as opposed to continually talking in circles. And I've heard all sides. I think that at least facilities we can get done at the moment and pursue with the hopes of sooner rather than later getting finance on board, at least a plan for it. I concur with Mr. Chapman in terms of moving forward and getting things done. I look forward to Mr. Silvia putting up his motion once again in a moment or two, unless someone else has their hand up. Chris, do you have your hand up again before we move on?
Yeah, I would move to put a motion on the table to move the facilities director position on all associated employees conversation to be executed by the town manager and the superintendent of schools.
Do we have a second? Well, we have to move to the next thing, I think, for that as well.
Point of order.
Yes.
My motion was delayed and removed because of the agenda. And now Chris is putting another motion ahead of the motion I presented. Am I being ignored?
That was my comment, that indeed, if he wants to do that, he should do that when we get to the next order of business. And obviously, Steve, I believe that yours is first.
That's correct.
Anyone else before we move on to the next order of business? Okay, because I don't have, there we go, James is putting it up. Then we'll move on to recommendations to the town council on shared services. There have been two resolutions, so to speak, that have been put up before us. Perhaps we should start there. Steve, let's start with yours. If you could
Thank you.
briefly.
Thank you, Chair. Given that we've had some very good discussion on this, and I do understand everything, I reiterate, I move that this board recommends the consolidation of both facilities and finance departments with the town of Newington under the town manager.
And I
Second.
believe, Mike, you seconded last time. You doing that again?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Mr. Camillo. Is there any further discussion concerning that before we take a vote? Okay. I do not see any hands up before me. Correct me if I'm wrong. I do see Mr. Vasella, who is not a member of the committee, but certainly Mr. Vasella.
Again, I realize that I'm not a voting member, and I just wanted to add on that motion under the direction of the town manager. You know, I as chairman of the Board of Education, I strongly, you know, that's my baby, and it sounded like you're taking all responsibility away from the board and putting it under the town manager. And that's just my only, and again, not being a voting member, I even hesitated raising my hand, but I do want to share that concern.
Mr. Sylvia?
Thank you very much, Paul. Mr. Chairman, I move that I be allowed to withdraw the motion and make another.
So moved, unless there's any objection. Okay, Mr. Sylvia?
Thank you. I move that this committee recommend the consolidation of the facilities and finance departments by September 1st.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Camillo, that's a second. Okay, any discussion on this revised resolution? Mr. Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would question the legality of the move and would ask for the town attorney to opine on it. Thank you.
Mr. Sylvia, do you have a further comment?
A motion is a motion, and I did not hear a division of the question for any other motions or items to be considered separately. Though I do understand Chris's position, should the town attorney have any issues with this motion, by all means, I'm happy to do that, but I would prefer that we at least vote on this motion this evening. And if it's illegal or proves to not have appropriate language in it that would pass the muster of the town attorney, then okay, I've been proven wrong and the motion is unworthy. But at this point, I don't see any reason why we have to wait for the opinion of the attorney on a motion that's been presented and seconded.
Mayor Del Buono?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Steve, the second time that you read the motion, you simply said move that the body recommend, that we move forward with the consolidation. The first time you read it, when it was tabled, you had said that this body recommend to both bodies, I believe, meaning the Board of Education and the council. I just wanted to clarify what your intent is in your motion. Is it that this committee is making that recommendation to each the board and the town council for their consideration, or are you simply making it to one body or the other?
No, it was my intent to have that recommendation go to both bodies.
Thank you, Steve. Any further comment before a vote is taken?
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Even though we're sending this, it sounds like, to the council, shouldn't we continue to have this discussion between the Board of Ed and the town manager's office? Right along, without stopping. Regardless.
I would hope they would talk daily, Chris.
Yes, that's really what I'd like to see happen, so it doesn't stop.
I would hope so too, Mike.
And then hopefully we can vote on this, and move on.
Any further comment before we take a vote? Okay, James, if you could read the rolls so we can take votes.
Certainly. Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
No.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Board Member Stan,
No.
Board Member Sylvia.
Yes.
So it passes 3-2.
Correct.
We have another resolution before us. If Mr. Minor would care to reiterate it or bring it before us, that's fine. If not, we will move on.
No, I'll be happy to make a motion again
Yes.
to move that the facilities director and facilities department positions both be forwarded to the Board of Education and Town Council for consideration of a consolidation of both departments under one purview of the town manager. And I believe this would show unity of this body versus division.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a second from Cindy Stam. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mayor Buono.
I guess I just don't understand, Chris. What's the difference between what you said and what was proposed under Steve's? I know Steve proposed both departments. So are you, I guess I just don't understand because the facilities was included under Steve's as well.
That's correct. I believe my only objection would be to advancing the finance department. As the initial discussion, we've had facilities going all the way back to when you were sitting on the previous committee with us, that we've had a much more extensive overview of both sides and what their objectives are and how they conduct the business. I think that's easy to achieve by the attrition that is due in July. And I think from the standpoint of continuing this, that we are doing something united versus there being division in terms of how we move this forward as a whole. I'm not saying I object to finance, but let's start somewhere. Let's get the next step somewhere versus, as you described before, marring it down and just getting dead stopped.
But I guess my point is that the motion that just passed already includes what you're suggesting. So I'm not certain that I understand. So if we were to pass your motion, that still doesn't nullify the first one that passed, correct? I'm looking for clarification from anyone on the committee that cares to join in.
I would think so, but I would like to ask James if he has anything to comment concerning it.
My point is, I don't think that your motion would nullify the first one. So I'm just trying to figure out how people would vote on the second one if they've already supported the first.
That's true.
We can leave it as is, withdraw the motion if that's the desire of the committee. But my desire was to try to show that this is united on both bodies versus showing division on how to proceed from now. So that's the only statement I can make to that. I'll be happy to withdraw it if that is the desire of the committee. If it's going to be nullified.
Steve?
Yeah. I'm somewhat in the boat with Mayor Dobuno, Chris. I understand your purpose is to say we're unified at least on facilities and we're divided on finance. And what I'm not grasping is that I'm interpreting that you do not want finance to be consolidated at all, and that you object to finance eventually. I don't care what the timeline is now. What I care is that I'm interpreting from you and Cindy, you do not want finance to be consolidated into one department. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Speaking for myself, no, that is not correct. For the decision to be made at hand now, I move forward with the facilities position as it was originally discussed and to continue the conversations on the remainders.
And by my motion, Chris, we've encouraged the conversations to continue, except that my motion had a timeline objective of September 1st. So that was the only reason why I'm asking the question the manner I is. So you're not objecting to the finance departments eventually consolidating, but you're wanting to say that we're all wanting facilities done immediately since the opportunity is readily available. I'm trying to get the conversations with finance going. Now, hopefully I put the September 1 there as a target date, and obviously we may or may not hit it. We may not get the admin to give us the decision that we hope for, but I just can't support just saying facilities all in by itself, and then we just let this finance sit over here to the side with no activity. So, you know, though I understand your purpose of saying we're all for facilities, it just appears to me that this divides us even more on the fact that we're not including finance.
Cindy, you have your hand up?
I just wanted to clarify. I do agree with Chris. I clearly agree with the facilities. I would like us to have continued discussion about the finance. I'm not opposed to it. I just think the discussion hasn't, that in-depth discussion on what it will look like and the details laid out. I would like to have that presented to us at another meeting. That's all, but that's.
I think that in the conversation presenting what this committee came up with for the resolution, we can state that everyone was in favor of facilities as an option for what is being discussed back and forth right now. Just a comment, and then I will continue letting others speak. Mayor Dobuno, you're next.
You're muted.
Mayor, you're muted.
So sorry. I unraised my hand but forgot to unmute. I wanted to clarify for Councilor Minor. I was not trying to be critical of your motion. I'm just trying to understand the validity of it in terms of, so right now we already voted on moving forward with 2. So if you put a motion for it to move ahead with facilities, that's just a duplicate essentially of what we did already. So it doesn't nullify the finance piece for moving forward is my point. The motion on the floor already passed. So if you want to do this motion, I think, and say that everybody's in favor of facilities, it's a duplicate effort, but the finance would still go forward because that motion already passed. It doesn't nullify that one. I wasn't suggesting that it nullifies yours, Chris, simply that it's a duplicate effort, I believe.
Any further comment by anyone?
Councilor Minor has his hand raised.
I'm sorry?
Councilor Minor has his hand raised.
Oh, okay, I see it now. Yes, Councilor Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will withdraw my motion as it was presented.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Minor. Cindy, you withdraw your second then?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion concerning what's on the agenda right now, what's to be proposed? I'm sorry, the exact wording I don't have in front of me. Thank you, James. We're getting there. Anything further in terms of recommendations to the Town Council on shared services? If not, we'll move on to public participation. James, is there anyone from the public viewing?
We do have one individual with us. If they are interested in speaking, they can use the *9 feature on their telephone or the raise hand feature inside of Zoom. We'll give her just a moment.
Okay, James, no one's
not
raising their hand.
Nope.
All right, if we could move on. Okay, we need to schedule the next meeting, and if there are any committee remarks at this time, why don't we start with schedule the next meeting, and if you have any other comments to make, we'll do that. My comment would be, unless the superintendent and the town manager disagree, that we schedule a meeting for next Monday at the same time.
Sounds good.
All right, once again, anybody have their hand up? I'm on the other. Okay, do we need to take a vote on that, James?
Yes, you do.
Okay, unless there is some comment, we will go to a vote. If you'd please read the roll.
Councilor Camillo,
Yes.
Councilor Minor,
Yes.
Councilor Nagel,
Yes.
Board Member Stam,
Yes.
Board Member Silvia,
Yes.
unanimous, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other committee comments by anyone at this time? I'm scrolling down here just to see if anybody's hand up. Mr. Silvia.
Thank you. I truly want to share my appreciation to everybody. I understand the passion and the dialogue that was occurring and the amount of work that's still in front of us. I think that Mr. Minor and Ms. Stam brought up very valid points to make sure that we're moving in a appropriate pace and change. My only purpose really was to create targets and milestones for us to achieve in order to, in my mind, in my DNA, is being able to monitor the activity as such, and so it doesn't languish. So I do thank everyone for listening to the participation, and I do agree that probably facilities is a slam dunk, and that the technology and the finance and the transportation departments will probably need a great deal more conversation and voir dire in order to come up with an appropriate solution. But I think we're making the first step, just like what happened with Anna Reynolds. We had to bring the thing before the Board of Ed in order to get stuff rolling. And I think this will help get the cart rolling in the appropriate direction. So thank you all for your time and support.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else care to make a comment before we move on to the next item of business? Okay, I don't see anybody's hand up at the moment. Just checking again. I'm back to the other form of checking attendees, so that's why I'm taking a second here. I would, my intention, I think the committee's intention is that Mr. Chapman and Ms. Brummett will meet again to further the talks involving facilities, which seems to be fairly well along, and also at least with finance and other areas, and that they report back to us at our meeting next Monday. Is there any other comment? Okay, thank you. If we can move on to the next order of business then. And that is adjournment. Can we,
Make a motion to adjourn.
thank you, Mr. Camillo. Do I have a second? I don't hear a second.
Second.
Thank you. And we have a second. We can take a roll, should we, or we can just, well, let's take a roll. Why not?
Counselor Camillo,
Yes.
Counselor Minor,
Yes.
Counselor Nagel,
Yes.
Board Member Stanton,
Yes.
Board Member Sylvia.
I like to always say no, but yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, thank you, James. Thank you, everyone involved for sharing a lively discussion tonight, and we will see you all Zoom somewhere along the line and definitely at our meeting next Monday at the same time. Thank you again.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.